Hello, I'm Pam of Healing Stars. This is a webinar about the eclipses. Now, eclipses occur twice a year, but in November the 3rd, the solar eclipse will be conjunct Saturn in Scorpio. This is a powerful time for us all to commit to our purpose. However, the ego fears change, so it can keep us stuck. Now, there are conflicting opinions about the meaning of the North Node and South Node, and I'm going to explain those differences. And then, of course, you can ask what your experience is. So here I'm going to be talking about the November 3rd eclipse and what it signifies astrologically, the spiritual significance of a solar eclipse, and the churning of the oceans, the Vedic myth that explains the deeper meaning of eclipses. And then I'm going to go through Eclipse and Saturn in Scorpio through all 12 houses. And finally, a healing process of letting go. Now, the nodes of the moon are planets, but two opposite points where the Earth's orbit around the Sun is crossed by the moon's orbit around the Earth. In Vedic astrology, they're actually known as shadow planets. Now, eclipses occur when there's a new or full moon within about 15 degrees of the nodes. It happens twice a year. Eclipses are always times of change, and eclipses may occur when the Earth and the Moon are aligned with the Sun, and it's the shadow of one body cast by the Sun falls on the other. So a solar eclipse at the new moon, twice a year at a new moon, when the moon is conjunction with the Sun, the moon may pass in front of the Sun as seen from a narrow region on the surface of the Earth, and this causes a solar eclipse. The lunar eclipse occurs at the full moon, and it's either before or after a solar eclipse. It can actually happen before and after, but anyhow, it's at a full moon when the moon is in opposition to the Sun, and the moon may pass through the shadow of the Earth. The lunar eclipse is visible from the night half of the Earth. This is called, the nodes of the moon are called the axis of destiny. They stay in one sign of the zodiac for approximately a year and a half. So people born in that time span are our soul group. In approximately 18 years, 18 and a half, the cycle repeats. So people born 18 years apart from us can share the same lunar node sign. They're also aligned to our soul group. Now the nodes move backward through the zodiac, spending about 18 months in each sign, and they're key indicators of growth and stagnation. And they connect the three primary astrological elements. They are the habits and emotions to do with the moon, our creativity, our consciousness, which is the Sun, and of course the place where we live, which is Earth. Now, way back in August 29, 2012, the moon's nodes left Sagittarius and Gemini, and they entered Scorpio and Taurus. Now, they're going to stay there till February 2014, but then they're going to pass through Libra and Aries. So this is the last eclipse in Scorpio. Now, they are extra potent new or full moons. So it shows, because it happens twice a year, it's showing the completion of one cycle and the beginning of the next. Now the eclipse energy will last for 6 months, so any degree it occurs on is known as being ultra-sensitive, and they're very important for world events, which is known as mundane astrology. And eclipses will signal what we need to change. So they're a rebirth. Now, they affect us personally if we have a planet or our rising sign, IC, our second house or seventh house rather, and the midheaven, if one of our angles is within 2 degrees of the eclipse. So also, if your birthday is within 2 days of these eclipses, it will be a really important year ahead with major life changes. The symbolism of the nodes, which is what I'm exploring in this webinar, this wonderful diagram you see here, this map of the heavens. And astrologer Dane Rudyard says, As the moon reaches its north node, it enters the area of north latitude. It's as if it were opening itself to cosmic or spiritual influences, symbolically represented by the North Pole, and more specifically the pole star, Polaris. Thus the North Node represents the point of intake of spiritual cosmic energies, and it was called the dragon's head, the nodal axis being symbolized by a dragon. So here in this diagram, here is Draco, the constellation which you can see wrapping around here, a star called Thuban is part of it, and over here is Polaris to the right. Now Draco, the dragon, guards the North Pole, and think of the North Pole as the centre, a point of stillness around which our world revolves. Here's another beautiful picture of this dragon, kind of symbolically circling around. So Draco, the dragon, is also the snake or the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and it once occupied a much larger space in the heavens, encompassing Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the great she-bear or mother goddess. Ursa Minor was known as the dragon's wings. And the dragon is a sort of half bird, half snake, a beautiful mythological creature. So this celestial dragon guarded the greatest treasure, the pivot point of the world, the ecliptic. And it never slept, because as a constellation it never sets. That's known as circumpolar. So it can be called the guardian of the spiritual treasure. So that in the eclipse, solar eclipse, we are connected to this point in our world. And this beautiful picture is the pole star of Polaris. And I think it's a wonderful image for meditation. The spiritual centre, there it is, the still point in the turning world. Now in Vedic astrology, the myth goes that the gods wanted the nectar of immortality, the demigods, and they needed the help of the demons because they needed their strength. They convinced the demons to help them by saying, "We'll share this nectar with you." And the demons bought the story. So what they did was they wrapped a serpent around, here you see it, around the rod, Mount Meru of the world. And then they squeezed the oceans of the world were churned for eons of time. And that symbolizes the Milky Way, because out came this nectar, out came this milk at the end. But they had a banquet, the gods, and they gave the demons alcohol. And the demons, drinking, thought they were immortal. But one demon was cleverer than the rest, and he got in the queue for the gods, and he disguised himself as one of them. And just as he drank that nectar, the sun and moon saw through his disguise. They told Lord Vishnu, who threw his discus, and he cut this demon in half at the neck. But it was immortal, and it went into the zodiac. The head went one way, the body the opposite way. Now they don't like the sun and moon, and they go backwards through the zodiac, and then, twice a year, they swallow them. But of course, out comes the sun or moon, because the head has no body and the body can't digest. So that is the story of eclipses. Notice the churning of the oceans. So eclipses can create turbulence in our lives. Now the astrological meaning, there are different viewpoints on this, and that's what I'd like you to understand and try out, research for yourself. The traditional view, and I've been taught this for many years now, author Stephanie Johnson describes it well. She says the North Node and South Node form an axis in astrology which is said to represent one's destiny or spiritual quest in life. and that this axis is linked to our purpose. So the North Node points to a key lesson in our lives. It represents new experiences towards which we must aim during this life. Now it says we've already learnt the skills of the opposite point, the South Node, in the past. Now we must grow and stretch ourselves through the North Node. And that is something you will read and read Viewpoints. Many people will say that. However, Dane Rudyard, an esteemed astrologer who lived in the last century, a real Renaissance man, he talked about it differently. And he was following more of the Vedic viewpoint. He's saying the South Lunar Node is the dragon's tail. So from a more strictly biological and functional point of view, the North Lunar Node refers to the mouth of an animal, the South Lunar Node to the organs of evacuation, which means both the anus, but also the procreative organs, from which the seed goes forth. Now, the fact that the South Lunar Node refers not only to the point of excretion of waste materials, but also to the release of seed materials, is still not understood by many astrologers today. He wrote that a long time ago, way back in the 20th century. So that's something to consider. In Vedic astrology, the South Node is a very spiritual place. It has no, Ketu has no ego, that's the dragon's tail, because it has no head. So the North Node is something we become obsessed by. We need to take in, like a mouth, always hungry for that information, or that aspect of our chart where it is situated. But the South, no, that's a point of liberation, spiritual liberation, letting go totally of the ego. So that's why they're so different viewpoints. So are you going towards the North Node, or are you surrendering to the South Node? Big difference. Okay, so now the North Node is in Scorpio. This is the Western system. The South Node is in Taurus. Now Scorpio is ruled by both Mars and Pluto. Often it's thought of as just Pluto, but actually traditionally it's Mars. If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Because of course, Mars and Pluto, Mars especially is the planet of passion. Pluto is connected to power. But it's going to contrast vividly with its opposite sign, the earthy Venusian energy of Taurus. Taurus is known to hold on. Scorpio is the sign of letting go. So, as I said, if you have a planet or an angle at the same degree as an eclipse, it will mean a big change in that area of your life. But change isn't always a bad thing. Big events can occur in our lives, such as the birth of a baby, a marriage, or a change of home or career. So noticing what house in your birth chart this eclipse takes place, because those aspects of your life are apt to change. So Jeff Jora talks about this. He's saying the transit of the North Node into Scorpio is a signal to dig in emotionally, to face our fears and desires. The South Node in Taurus, though, attracts us to comfort, ease and self-satisfaction. Scorpio challenges existing values, rattles relationships, and re-examines the use of resources. So it's understandable that we prefer to stay on the Taurus side of the nodal axis because it's a less demanding sign. So addressing the deeper issues of Scorpio is tougher than enjoying the sensual indulgences of Taurus. Yet during the next 18 months, he's talking about this from last year, the progress we make as humans will, to some degree, depend upon our willingness to engage them. He's a Western astrologer, American, very clever, and I follow him all the time. Now the other aspect, according to astrologer Stephanie Austin, she talks about the eclipses realign the Earth's electromagnetic field and our own individual energy field. Eclipses function to delete old programs and upload new templates. I find this really exciting. So they mark the ending of a 19-year cycle, the beginning of a new direction. So eclipses can be said to stimulate the pineal gland, which is the seat of our soul, our third eye. And this is our inner vision and creativity. So eclipses can facilitate awakening of our soul's blueprint. And this image of the pineal gland I find quite beautiful. And then of course this is the symbol of the chakra of the third eye. Now the solar eclipse, which is the new moon in Scorpio, will be on November the 3rd at 12:49 p.m. GMT. Now the totality will be visible from the northern Atlantic Ocean, which is east of Florida, to Africa, which is Gabon, landfall, Congo, around Uganda. But it's very brief. It's a maximum of just 1 minute and 39 seconds, visible from the Atlantic Ocean south of Ivory Coast and Ghana. Now, always eclipses are to do with going within, of meditation. It's never a good time to launch something or start a major project, because the light has gone. The light of the moon, the light of the sun. So the sun and moon are the two luminaries, the two lights that we are guided by, the sun in the day and the moon at night. So if temporarily they are not visible, you can appreciate why it's not a good time to start something. Now, this is the chart for the solar eclipse on November 3rd. What is really powerful in this chart is the water element is really dominant. Water governs emotions and healing especially. So in the turquoise sector, that's Scorpio, there's the North Node, Mercury, Moon, Sun and Scorpio. It's a lot of energy in Scorpio. We also have, and it's making a beautiful trine to this eclipse, we have Neptune and Chiron, both in Pisces. Both are retrograde at this time, as is Mercury. We have a very strong opposition of Neptune and Chiron also to Mars, but that's very tricky. We also, as you can see, the opposition, always there's an opposition of the North Node to the South Node, which I always put in charts. I always put the South Node in. So you can see these two big oppositions. There's also the ongoing square for Uranus and Pluto, and it's virtually exact at this eclipse. Now Pluto and Uranus are creating huge havoc, huge changes in the world and on an ongoing basis. So it's not new, but we are reaching another climax or crisis of that energy. However, the Sun and Moon are creating a conjunction with Saturn and Mercury, but they create what is known as a talent triangle, and that is they're forming a sextile crosshair to Pluto and another sextile to Mars, and then Mars and Pluto are joined by what is known as a trine. They're the blue lines you see. Now that is very, very good. Okay, so Earth, which is what Mars is in Earth sign, Pluto's in an Earth sign, combine very well with water. Think about a pot, pottery, that's what you do, isn't it? You combine water and earth to create something. Bricks are, of course, water and earth. So this is a very good flow of energy. The North Node is also, the eclipse is also trining Chiron, the planet of healing. Very, very close. It's 9 degrees of Pisces, it's Chiron, and the eclipse is at 11 degrees. Now that 11 degrees, I haven't mentioned it, that is the degree of the eclipse. So any planet that you have around 11, 9, 13, you are definitely influenced by this eclipse. If it's in Scorpio, absolutely. Now the other very nice thing to notice is Jupiter is also in the water sign of Cancer, and although it's not as strong, the blue line is weaker than the strong, which means the title of the aspect, the stronger the line, but it's still there making a trine to this eclipse. Positive energy. Very, very positive energy. The other very interesting thing to know, Mars governs Scorpio, Venus governs Taurus, so the eclipses are related very much to what's going on with Mars and what's going on with Venus. Now Venus is at an interesting degree. She's in Sagittarius at 28 degrees. Now this is known as the galactic center, which is the heart of our galaxy. It's the sun's sun, and astronomers have actually recorded sound coming from this place. It's what the Mayans knew about. This is extremely powerful and potent. Now Venus does go around that point every year, as does the sun, but to have it at an eclipse I feel is very significant and very beautiful, because Venus in Sagittarius gives us hope, and it gives us connection to something much deeper than ourselves. And Jupiter is in Cancer, where it's exalted. Jupiter governs the sign of Sagittarius. We've also got, Venus is making what we call a quintile. That's these, you can't see them very well, but these turquoise lines are known as quintiles or biquintiles, and they are very creative. They divide the circle of 360 degrees into 72 degrees. It's a creative aspect. Now Mercury also is very crucial to this eclipse, because the messenger is exactly with the North Node. I'm using the mean nodes if you want to know technically. And Mercury goes retrograde, so it's going to pass over that degree 3 times. It passed the first time on the 6th of October. Then again here on the 3rd of November at this eclipse, it's retrograde. And then finally will pass over the North Node on the 17th of November. Now the North Node does change, does move, but very slightly. It's not very dramatic. So it's around the same degree, around 7 degrees. But Mercury as a messenger, this is important. It's saying, listen to what we're being told. Listen to messages that are coming from the underworld, which is the realm of Scorpio. These are not necessarily obvious, but to really be tuned in to your dreams at this time as well. But the overall feeling of the eclipse, as I'm saying in my headline, is commitment. That's what Saturn is asking of us. The Vedic chart is sidereal. It's to do with the fixed stars, but it also adds to the picture, so I'm putting it in. And here, the whole sign is a house, and the signs go in a clockwise direction. Here, the Sun, the Moon, Mercury, the North Node, Saturn, they're all in the sign of Libra. Now, Libra is the sign concerning relationships. Saturn is exalted in Libra, and it's aspected by Jupiter, so this is beneficial. Venus, however, occupies a difficult lunar mansion. It's called Mula over here in Sagittarius. It's governed by, or ruled by, the Niriti, and that's the god of disintegration, similar to Kali energy. However, Venus is also aspected by Jupiter. So Jupiter is doing well. This chart is set for London. It's in the 7th house of relationships, set for London, but directly aspecting all the planets in Libra and all the planets in Sagittarius. It also aspects all the planets in Aquarius. Now, I've put Chiron and Neptune in. They are not Vedic planets, but I use them. Mars is here in Leo at this time. It isn't aspecting the eclipse in Libra, which is maybe a good thing, because Mars is to do with war. However, Mars is about action. Now also, the solar eclipse, the lunar mansion, There are 27 lunar mansions, and the lunar mansion that the eclipse is occurring in is called Swati. Now the deity or the god is called Vayu, god of the winds. The symbol is a fresh plant blowing in the wind. Our keywords are eager to learn, restless, sensitive, very fragile. And it's also a business sign, Libra. But the fragility, I think the sensitivity is really important, because this is about Libra and relationships. And the lunar eclipse in October has the opposite sign of Aries in both Vedic and Western astrology, and Aries is impulsive, it's ruled by Mars, anger. So we are being asked to be careful about what we say. If we say things too quickly, too suddenly, and hurt and upset others. Now, here's Saturn. One person I thought was rather clever describes it as the cosmic chiropractor, i.e. what needs to be adjusted. The picture is of Saturn. These are the beautiful rings of Saturn. So the key word, of course, is commitment. Saturn's principle, his lord of the rings, is boundaries, but also a gateway because he's the last visible planet. So he defines our boundaries, but also opens up to the higher, unseen world. So questions to ask Saturn, these are important for you. What is the great work of my life? Where do I need to guard against excesses of caution and hesitancy? And what fear unconsciously shapes and limits my scope of self-expression? So as you can see, the positive qualities of Saturn are structure, discipline, persistence. It's work, it's labour, it's effort. But the negative can be guilt, fear, resistance, and limitations. So this is why it's often called, a difficult planet in Western astrology. Oh, Saturn, we go, oh, in that kind of tone of voice. Now, fear is, I would say, one of the biggest problems, because eclipses are a time of darkness. They're of ignorance, the lowest vibration. Ego resists change because it's fear of the unknown. Our ego, and I'm talking about it as the small part of ourselves, is, as I said, it doesn't like change. It wants to keep us in the known. But of course, that keeps us stuck. So we may fear taking chances. Safety and security is an issue. We may resist change as well as input from others. And we may find ourselves imprisoned by the world of the five senses and need to learn to fiercely confront the possibility of crisis and change in our lives. And that's the Scorpio-Taurus axis. So the idea is for us to be moving out of the seemingly solid and stable material world. It can seem intimidating. But eclipses, I'm going to talk about them through the houses. Eclipse is a spotlight. Think of it as a spotlight that's shining on the pathway of your life. This is a quote actually from Bernadette Brady. And it suddenly flashes on and off. So it's going to bring hidden patterns to the surface. So what have you shoved under the carpet, or like the ostrich, you've got your head stuck in the sand? Will you accept the challenge being offered by the events of the eclipse? And are you willing to make the necessary changes in your life? Because the nature of an eclipse, it is a wild card. It's inconsistent, it's stressful, it exposes hidden problems, it can be chaotic, and unexpected events can occur. In the mundane world, in the world, the path of an eclipse is, the solar eclipse I'm describing here, is temporarily darkened, and this can create a sudden coolness in temperature of that Earth. So what can happen after is it can weaken the Earth, and that's why the eclipse path is often followed by earthquakes. If that country is prone to earthquakes, I hasten to add. And this is quite interesting to observe. It's not obviously good to experience. But the difference between a lunar eclipse is important to know. A lunar eclipse is more emotional. It's internal. So it's a time when we ponder the problems of our life. So events are then brought about by our own thoughts or feelings. Solar eclipse is more external events that we haven't consciously caused. That's why it's known as a wild card. Now, if you get your chart handy, it's important to look and see where Scorpio is in your chart, because this is where the eclipses and Saturn are going. Saturn has been going through that part of your chart since October, but it's really being brought to the surface now with prominence because of the eclipse on November 3rd. So if it's occurring in your first house, change is the key word for eclipses, all right? So it may be a change or rebirth, your physical body, your self-image. You might have a makeover. Okay, it's how you dawn on people. The Saturn energy is about work, so you know what you need to do. You must know what needs to be changed. And so you are facing a challenge that demands great work of you. But you can grow in maturity and self-respect. You can develop as a professional. But also the first house is opposite the 7th, and that's the relationship house. So the South Node is going through the 7th at the same time. So you may find you're ending a relationship, or the opposite may be true. You might commit to a new one. Now this isn't going to affect you unless, remember, the eclipse 11 degrees is very close to your ascendant or a planet in your first house. But it will, Saturn is still going through it. We can't avoid Saturn. Now the second house of the birth chart is to do with your values. It's to do with money and self-esteem. Because how much self-esteem and self-worth we have is often how much we charge for our time or our work. It's also our possessions, so how we value ourselves. So here can create a big change, a big shift at this time. You might want to raise, if you're freelance or self-employed, raise your prices. But also you might be suffering a crisis in confidence because of Saturn. You might go through self-doubt. You might think, I don't have what it takes. So can you acquire what is needed to go forward? Maybe it is a new skill. Maybe you need to address the deficit and get qualified to increase your self-respect. So if you've been thinking about some course of study or technical, anything that's going to increase your self-worth, this is the time the eclipse can bring that about. The third house, now this is a communication house. It's also your voice, correspondence. It's your local neighbourhood too. Now, change in this area can mean maybe your voice, the way you express yourself, becoming more disciplined, slowing down speech. That's what Saturn says. So deal with anything that maybe damaged your voice. When I mean that, I mean, how you express yourself, how you claim your voice. Very important. Maybe time to get down and write that book you've been talking about, or your ebook or your website, because Saturn can bring the discipline needed. Saturn is also solitary. That's the problem. Some of these things we do have to do on our own. And if we're very social, that's not easy for us. But Saturn is wanting this, and the eclipse may bring that about. The fourth house of the chart is the very basis of your chart, the root. So it's your home, where you live, your mother, family, emotional defenses, roots, foundations, your inner world. It's the midnight part of your chart, so think about that. It's dark, isn't it? Deep. Also your ancestors, where you've come from. So this eclipse and with Saturn is a call for maturation. You might have feelings. What feelings do you have about getting older? Because something needs to die. Some sadness, you may have to go through some loss, but something else can be born, which is more grown up. It's a theme very much, an emotional house of the fourth. letting go. So in the 5th house, this is a creative house. This is a house of love affairs, a house of gambling, play, self-expression and children. So Saturn is always saying now, we've got to get serious about having fun, about pleasure. We might have to learn the discipline of spontaneity. So it's about getting our work and pleasure in balance. Are you numbing pain, any emotional pain, about love with work? So it's about commitment to a social life of having fun and what brings you joy. A very positive energy. And eclipse could bring, possibly, a new love into your life. Or a child, perhaps. Creative project too. So the 6th house, this is a house of work, jobs, service, roles and duties, but also skills, talents you have, but also your health, very importantly. That's why you see someone gardening in this image and someone doing a lovely yoga pose here. So Saturn is saying, look around, people around you look to you now to meet their needs. You're called to be of service wholeheartedly. But also, an eclipse can bring change in your habits to lead a healthier lifestyle. I say that with a kind of nagging voice because Saturn most probably is nagging you at this time. You might have to get more serious about your health if you've been neglecting it. 7th house, relationships. Marriage, business partners, also clients are to do with the 7th house. And also adversaries, open enemies. We see them because they're right in front of us. Saturn traditionally means that maybe a time of solitude, but it also means commitment to a relationship. Maybe taking a step up in an existing one to a new level. But also maybe breaking up any stagnant routines if you're in a long-term married or long-term relationship. Time for that energy of the eclipse can bring that change about, which can be a positive, not necessarily negative. Now the 8th house, this is Scorpio's natural house. Here it's all about transformation, the occult, sex. It's a merging. The 8th house is about merging. It's other people's money, inheritance, death itself, but also things like psychotherapy. Astrology is also connected to the 8th house. It's transformation. So Saturn, there's a hunger for a raw, deeper kind of love. So it's having the courage to express strong, intense feelings with your partner. Honesty will lead to deeper intimacy. The possibility is also maybe to be in the presence of death, to hold someone's hand at this time. That's a very important and quite beautiful, I think, process that Saturn can bring about. But also, you may possibly have an inheritance, something that comes right out of the blue. Now, the eclipse in the 9th house, this is the house, very positive, a house of dharma or purpose. Travel is indicated, long distance, not short journeys. It's also a house to do with religion, your beliefs, higher education, the law and philosophy. So Saturn may be asking you, you might have been going through this already, of course, to question your belief systems. Have you outgrown them? It's time for your faith to mature and revision your view of the world. It's time to expand your consciousness. Anything like higher education is favoured and will be for another year. So a university or studying for a degree, but also travel as a healing journey, not just as, nice though it is, we're not talking about, the usual type of holiday. Hence the picture on the right to do with things like the Buddha. Different qualities to faith and religion. Spiritual quest. Now the 10th house of our chart is the pinnacle, the highest most point of our birth chart. So it's to do with our career, to do with our father, success, any achievement we make, also our status, our professional expression. So here we have the astronaut on top of the world in that picture. It's also very high buildings, of course, and it's naturally connected to Saturn because Saturn wants achievement. So if you're going through an eclipse and Saturn in your 10th house, this is a peak time in your life. It's all about your mission and your vocation. Any volunteer work will increase your reputation, stepping up in the community, so you get to be seen as this person who's responsible. So Saturn likes service. It's especially true in Vedic astrology. We balance Saturn's negativity with asking who needs my help. So here we say, what are you doing in the world? That eclipse might well jolt that energy if you haven't already thought about it. The 11th house of the birth chart is a really nice house. It's to do with friends, people we choose to be with, of course. It's our groups that we join. And it's also our hopes and our dreams. So the phrase where the cosmos grants wishes, luck, friends and social occasions. This girl looking out her window, gazing at the star. Saturn wants us to set our priorities. And one thing is, not every dream can be fulfilled. The dreams that we had when we were young might not be true today. So what's important for you now? Are your goals realistic? And eclipses can bring change. You might suddenly leave a group that you've been a member of for a long time, or find yourself a member of something new, something out of the ordinary. Remember, it is a very creative energy, eclipse. For the 12th house, this is the last house of the birth chart, the most unseen part. So hidden strengths and weaknesses are seen here. So it can be a house of suffering, but a house of withdrawal. It's our inner world, and also the divine, which is beautiful, and behind the scenes. So Saturn going through this house with this eclipse now, it really is a completion time, the end of a cycle. So that eclipse might well bring that about for you over the next month. Responsibilities may be finishing now, which is, for instance, the kids leave home. Old routines can break up. Spiritual awakening is actually what is needed. So your relationship to the divine needs to mature. It's opposite the 6th house of healing, of health. So anything that you do around healing could also, for instance, if you started yoga or developed your spiritual practice, that would also resonate with this 12th house. Holding on. Now, holding on, letting go, this is what I'm going to talk about next. Now, holding on, this is what the Taurus South Node is all about. So the tendency is to be overly self-reliant and set in our ways. Wherever Taurus is, but especially now with the South Node eclipse point, we can cling to our possessions, material and otherwise, and our habits. And we can be too fearful of crisis and overly focused on security. So in an attempt to achieve success through sheer will, rather than listening to our 6th sense. So this is from Cafe Astrology, a website on the internet. It's saying we need to loosen the grasp we have on the things and people around us and open ourselves up to our soul's need for transformation, change, and regeneration. Those are Scorpio qualities, all of those. Now, because the North Node is in Scorpio, this growth is needed, and letting go is the key principle. Pictures from Chuck Spezzano, Enlightenment Pack, by the way. So clinging to things and people that are either outdated, limiting, or counter to our growth will steer us in the wrong direction. Letting go of the past allows new goals and directions to appear. And a direct quote from Chuck's book, "You cannot win if you hold on and demand that life return to a past which didn't fully satisfy you before." So with letting go, the past is not lost or thrown away. That's what the ego wants us to believe, all right? It's simply put into perspective. And it allows you to live in the present once again. And this is because once we let go of the past, it's as if it still exists in our mind, but of course it doesn't. So by letting it go, the good things of the past can come into our present reality. Letting go also releases any judgment, grievance, guilt, loss, and need and fear which actually lurk beneath every holding on. Now, if we're holding on to a past relationship, this is especially true, this next point, choosing this allows your attractiveness to re-emerge. And it also allows your life to unfold and improve. You can then take the next step, which brings new possibility and a truer life. And this beautiful image is from the Osho Zen Tarot. And you can see it's a leaf with a dewdrop, and that water, that dew, just has to fall. It has to drop. It has to let go. It's a very beautiful picture. Hope you agree. Now, using the letting go principle, we're coming to the point now where we're going to be doing a very brief little exercise, but very relevant. And notice this tarot card. This card is to do with cups. It's the 8 of cups in the tarot. And this symbol in the sky, this is actually an eclipse. Here's the sun and moon. It's eclipsed. And notice how this man, the traveller, dressed in red, if you know the tarot, he relates directly to the Fool right at the beginning of the journey in the Major Arcana. And he's moving, he's leaving these cups. He's leaving them behind. There's nothing wrong with them, they're still standing. But he's moving to higher ground. And he has, it's very important, the symbols, the rod in his hand, or staff, which if you recall is the whole principle of the North Node, of the Polaris rather, should we say, the still point, that rod, that churning point on Mount Meru is symbolized here. So off he's going, he's not looking back, he's just moving ahead. So coming back to this principle, using the letting go principle. So I'd like you to think now, look for what person or the aspects or qualities of a person, situation, or past event you're holding on to, which is stopping your present success. And I'm doing this with you. So once you've got that quality in your mind, and you may want to stop the recording if you haven't, just pause it for a while. I'd like you to now close your eyes. Because now what I'd like you to do in your mind is to take a short journey to God's trading post. Or if you don't like the word God, heaven's trading post. So take the quality or the person or people that you're holding on to, or a situation in your past where maybe you were successful. Whatever it is, just see yourself in your mind. You can create it as an image, perhaps a colour, a symbol of what you're going to hand over. So as you're holding this energy, I'd like you to take it and put it into heaven's hands. Hands of an angel if you prefer, or God if you like God. and in your mind, I'd now like you to see what heaven wants to give you in its place. Again, this may be an image, maybe a quality, a soul gift. It's something of real value that you can take on the next step in your journey. And when you're ready, you can come back and open your eyes. See that beautiful picture of that gate, of those stairway to heaven. And the cosmos is open for you to receive your soul gift. So I'm going to leave you now with an affirmation. And this comes from another book I have on tarot. And the other card connected to Scorpio is actually the Death card, number 13. But this is transformation. So the affirmation is saying, I leave my needs and relationships behind and seek the higher light within myself. The more I let go, the freer and luminous I become. So ask, believe, and receive like this beautiful young child. The energy, the spiritual connection that's available to you, especially on the day of the solar eclipse, November 3rd. So this is my website, and I'd like to thank you for listening to my webinar. And I also, the credits I've given to Bernadette Brady, Chuck Spizzano, Cafe Astrologer, Jeff Jaw, and of course Tad Mann I just mentioned. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to answering your questions.